I'm not sure how we're going to get through this. It's certainly not following procedure. It's not only counter to procedure, it's a cover-up. It's a criminal conspiracy. We have a serious problem. I mean, we're going to need to have this conversation. Who polices the police?
In 2021, Ottawa Police Detective Helen Grus, a veteran of the Sexual Assault and Child Abuse Unit called SACA, noticed a troubling rise in sudden infant deaths post-COVID vaccine rollout. This coincided with data like Pfizer's own trials, which flagged a roughly 97% fatality rate in unborn babies. Duty-bound, Grus queried police records in an attempt to rule out the potential connection. But instead of answers, she instead found herself, and continues to find herself, in Canada's longest police disciplinary tribunal. Charged with discreditable conduct for an unauthorized probe, she was silenced mid-testimony by hearing officer Chris Renwick, who ruled that probing health officials or politicians needs higher up approval due to the political and societal ramifications. It begs the question, is everyone really equal under the law? When a detective seeking the truth for babies faces punishment, trust in policing undoubtedly fades. Officers hesitate and fear reprisal. Last week's sentencing hearing in Canada from September 3rd to 5th brought more delays, but public support grows, with affidavits urging fairness pouring in support of Grus. If cleared, Grus could pave the way for fearless investigations, but if penalized, more COVID truths will be buried. Joining me to discuss the proceedings is retired OPP Officer Vincent Gerses, 32 years in crime investigations, emergency response, and forensic reconstruction. He's an electronic engineering degree holder and an OPP Exemplary Service Medal recipient. Post-retirement, he's championed civil liberties, joining the 2022 Freedom Convoy, representing Police for Freedom, testifying at the National Citizens Inquiry on COVID-19, challenging the Emergencies Act, and running for the Ontario Party in Niagara Centre. Here's what he had to say.
Well, things went fairly quickly, and they were kept very short for both days. So on the first day of the hearing, started in the morning, the prosecutor attempted to introduce a single document, and it was a victim impact statement, and it was by an anonymous person, and it was not sworn. So there was some controversy over the acceptance of that document, and the hearing stopped so that the hearing officer could ponder the evidence and reach a decision the following day. So that's as far as it went the first day. The second day, the hearing started with the hearing officer making a comment that the document would not be allowed to be introduced because it was anonymous and it was not sworn. And he felt he wanted to follow what he referred to as best practices. So following best practices, he turns the opportunity over to defense Bathsheba Vandenberg, who is Detective Grus's lawyer, to make a submission. And at that time, her lawyer, Bathsheba Vandenberg, submitted a substantial amount of documents. I would say it was 10 or 12 inches thick was the total submission. That's thousands of pages being submitted. And that took the hearing officer and the prosecution by surprise. Her lawyer had indicated that what the contents were was predominantly performance evaluations, commendations that she had received over the course of her career, and a number of submissions that were made by members of the public in relation to sentencing. So these documents are essentially witness statements, not witness statements, but statements indicating from the public how they feel that this sentencing is going to affect policing, how it's going to affect Canadians as a whole, and how it's going to affect the law enforcement community. So there were a number of statements that were submitted. And as a result, the prosecution said that they felt they needed time to review this information prior to submission. And the hearing officer had made the decision to take a 1-hour break so that he can very quickly skim over what this content is, and then making a decision whether the trial proceeds or they take a substantial break in time so that prosecution and her client, the client is the chief of police, can take time to review what this submission is.
The way in which the tribunal refuses to hear from experts and others on the justification that Grus had to question and raise the questions that she was, an attempt to rule out a connection with the novel modified RNA injections, is something that Grus says is a cover-up for corruption.
I have to say, I think historically, this is the worst case in Canadian history of an obstruction, of a cover-up. I have to say it's the greatest cover-up that has ever happened in the history of our nation. I have never seen anything like this happen, and it's a clear obstruction of this case. It's an obstruction of justice. We know that the media runs censorship and runs cover and has bias, but policing services are not supposed to be operating on a principle of bias or running cover for anyone or anything. I have never seen this in the course of my career. I have never, ever experienced this in this country. And I find it hard to believe, but this isn't the case. We're at the point now where this isn't the case of one expert arguing another expert. This is a case of government's own data, health agencies' data, and what we're seeing in the performance of this police service and other police services that combined are intentionally covering up information, and that information is so damning, but it is coming out. And other than the fact that the mainstream media is not covering it, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. We are using government information, health agency information, and just displaying it as it is. Nobody's offering an opinion here. This is just factual information.
The disturbing inability for factual information to be brought forward showing that Grus was justified in querying this alarming increase in sudden infant deaths is a chilling testament to a system that prioritizes protecting the powerful over pursuing the truth. And Grus says that this case highlights how perverted the rule of law has become in Canada.
Well, there's no question that the rule of law in Canada no longer exists, and that is the danger that we all face. And we're seeing that by how this particular matter is unfolding and how a number of other matters have unfolded. It's catastrophic right now in law enforcement and within our justice system. And again, this is not an opinion. This is factual information that the rule of law no longer applies. We cannot have a system in this country where law enforcement chooses to administer one set of rules in a hearing, operate in a certain manner, and then run cover in other ways. And this all comes back to, generally speaking, this orthodoxy of a dominant narrative that has been put out there. When the COVID situation started and the dominant narrative and the orthodoxy is safe and effective, nothing was allowed to interfere with that, and that was to be sacrosanct. And in fact, the reason that the Detective Grus has been shut down is because she was the only officer in Canada, and she is a SACA officer, so she deals with sexual assault and child abuse. That is her function, and she's the only officer that started to question things. But when her questioning interferes with that orthodoxy, they came after her, and they came after her very harsh. And what we are seeing here, all the evidence clearly indicates she was right in having the inclination to proceed in the way she was. Now, that being said, you had brought up the comments that were made during the hearing in her finding of guilt, that she should have sought permission. Police officers up until a year ago are not required to seek permission to investigate and question things. But what does that say about our entire judicial system? And what does it say that the Comprehensive Police Services Act of Ontario in the province of Ontario has now changed its operational procedure within the Police Services Act to say that officers now, as of the last year, are required to get permission from their supervisors prior to launching a criminal investigation. The manner in which that runs cover for corruption within our systems in this country is going to speak volumes very quickly in the future.
Sadly, there aren't many options in place to come back from this. Grus explains that the Special Investigations Unit called the SIU is specifically mandated to investigate the police when they engage in serious misconduct. But in a case like Grus's, where the alleged wrongdoing is probing potential crimes by the elite rather than harming civilians, the SIU's oversight seems more like a fox guarding the henhouse, leaving whistleblowers like Grus with no impartial recourse, and the truth, once again, buried.
When senior management and chiefs and commissioners start working closely together with politicians and health officials and concealing information and intentionally not looking at evidence, we have a serious problem. I mean, we're going to need to have this conversation. Who polices the police? And I think at this point, the only way that we can really blow the door open on the totality of this, because I'm telling you, there are other police agencies involved as well. The only way we can get through this is through a national inquiry. Right now, we have the National Citizens Inquiry that has been taking place for the last 2 to 3 years across Canada. And if your audience looks up the content from hundreds of expert witnesses that have testified at the National Citizens Inquiry, the evidence is there and it's revealing, but it's not being recognized by the government. So we're going to need something to expose this. We have the work done by Health Canada and the reporting and the concerns, and a lot of that information did become public. It's just people really had to dig deeply to find it. But from a policing concern, in the case of Helen Grus, when she started to raise the question, this is where the forensic examination comes into play, because it's not just police officers. I mean, police bring in resources from everywhere possible to start to address this issue. But when the inquiry is shut down, as a matter of fact, her preliminary investigation and just probing into what could be causing this was a very logical and reasonable concern to take. And it needed to be ramped up into a much bigger investigation so that we can all come to realize what is causing this problem. But when police services shut down their own investigators, we have a really big problem. And I am so shocked at what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing by this evidence. I'm not sure how we're going to get through this. It's certainly not following procedure. It's not only counter to procedure, it's a cover-up. It's a criminal conspiracy on a massive scale, beyond anything I have ever had to comprehend, involving the death of babies.
Now, these are massive claims with sweeping implications if and when the information contained within the documentation given to the Ottawa Police goes public. So what's next in the Grus proceedings? Grus has those details.
So it's to come back at a later date to be determined by both prosecution and defense, and they're going to have to agree on a date. I suspect it will be about 2 months down the road, because it's a lot of information. First of all, it's a lot of information to unpack. And secondly, if the content is what I believe it to be, based on what I have heard, there is a huge fire that is going to be taking place, and I'm not sure if they even know how to put it out at this point.
For anyone at home who wants to learn more, you can tune into the Deprived Justice podcast, streaming every Wednesday night with Vincent Grus and retired Toronto Sergeant and Detective Donald Best. Last episode, they launched the Grus Justice Project. It's a registered Canadian nonprofit for Detective Grus, fighting political meddling in her COVID-19 infant death probe, but also more broadly to restore the rule of law and police independence, free from interference, so investigations can chase truth and not agendas. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. If you agree that fast-tracking experimental products with no long-term safety data isn't the kind of science that Canadians signed up for throughout the COVID mass injection regime, then make your voice heard at nomoreshots.ca, calling for the removal of market authorization for these products. You can also sign up there so that you never miss a report on this topic. That's nomoreshots.ca.